Hey there, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we are looking at the jazz standard All the Things You Are. It's a great tune, often one of the first standards people learn when they first get into jazz. And I'm going to start off by talking about the history of the tune and its journey over the years. Then I'm going to do an on-paper harmonic analysis and talk about some ways to expand upon what's written on the page. This song was originally part of a 1939 musical called Very Warm for May, with the music written by Jerome Kern and the libretto by Oscar Hammerstein II. I'm not really sure what the show was about, but unfortunately it was not that successful. However, one thing people took away from the show was this song. It got picked up by some swing bands, which was the popular form of music at the time. And eventually the bebop guys got a hold of it and started playing it. You know, it works out pretty well with all those 2/5s, so they had a fun time, and thus it found its place as one of the top jazz standards of all time, and pretty much played by every great jazz musician at one point. Now for some notable recordings of the tune. Early ones include Tommy Dorsey and Artie Shaw. Those two recordings appear to be the first pop versions released shortly after the musical ended its run, and those are both with vocals. Another vocal version I've always liked is by Frank Sinatra. Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker made a notable recording, and I'll talk more about its significance later on. My two favorite renditions include one by Bill Evans and another by Joe Pass. Both of those happen to be solo, unaccompanied performances. Bill recorded this tune a few times throughout his career, but I really like his work. In 1963, he made a very expansive solo piano recording, and I'll be referencing that one quite a bit later on. He also recorded it with a trio using some of the same ideas as his solo recording. Joe Pass played this tune on his first Virtuoso album. Again, pretty wild and expansive, some really good ideas for guitar, so I'll be referencing that one as well. Some other good versions. Sonny Rollins recorded this one a few times. John Scofield has a really nice contemporary version. It's just a very widely recorded song. Something interesting is Michael Jackson, as in King of Pop Michael Jackson, actually recorded the song when he was still pretty young. It's kind of like a disco pop version. It's kind of interesting. You might want to check it out. And something else I'm going to reference a bit is the original version from the musical. The original cast did make some recordings, and I did find them, but to my understanding, these were only for like promotional, commercial use, not really an official, recording of the show. So there are some very, very early versions of All the Things You Are, but I don't believe the original cast sang it when it was in its final form. However, there is a version on YouTube that appears to be the original orchestration and format from the show. So I'm including the link in the description so you can check it out. Now, there's not much information about that video, but after a bit of Googling, I believe I was able to find a recording of that arrangement, that same arrangement, on a CD on Amazon. And the general consensus from the reviews seems to be that it is accepted as the original arrangement. So I'm just going to go with it. It's obviously very well done, good enough for us to trust it for right now. And for the purpose of this analysis, I'm just going to refer to that video as the original recording. And on that note, I'm going to begin looking at the music. And right at the beginning, we have something interesting that I'm going to talk about. And it is this intro right here. This odd, bluesy, kind of funky vamp. So, yeah. If you listen to the original recording I was just talking about, you'll notice that this intro that I just played is nowhere to be found, and there's nothing that even remotely resembles it. Instead, Kern wrote a verse, a pretty long verse, and it's very beautiful, and it nicely sets up the rest of this tune. But it's just way too complex to be played in a jazz setting or to be included on a lead sheet. So it's no surprise that, you know, as jazz players were starting to play this song, they just skipped the verse altogether. You know, they've done that with many other songs as well. But at some point, as this tune was becoming popular on the jazz scene, somebody came up with this intro. And I'm going to take a guess that it was probably Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, someone in that crowd, maybe Bud Powell or even Miles Davis. I don't know if anybody can say for sure, but one reason I think it was those guys is because their recording, Bird and Diz, is the first version that uses this intro. I'm not 100% sure of it, but it was the earliest recording where I could find, you know, documentation of what's written here on the page. Earlier versions of All the Things You Are by the swing bands, they didn't do this intro. They did their own thing, you know, they wrote it, you know, a short little intro, and that's fine. So I can imagine the bebop guys, you know, coming up with something like this where they can noodle around a bit. And I think one day they were probably just having fun messing around, trying to figure out how to start the song, and they came up with this. So really, what do we have here? I'm not going to label anything just yet, but we'll get into that in a bit. Generally speaking, we have two dominant chords. Start off with this D flat 7 sharp 9, sounds like that, and then move a half step down to C7 sharp 9, and you repeat that. It says to only repeat it once. Most people only repeat it once, but I've always thought you could, you know, vamp that if you like, if you want to, you know, expand. As many times as your heart desires. So two dominant chords, you know, great for improv. You could say that, you know, moving down a half step, you could say this chord is resolving down a half step, and it's just going back and forth, very jazzy, you know, very cool. If you go one step further, if you look past this C7 chord, you'll see that, yes, this chord eventually does resolve to an F minor chord. So we could say this chord, you know, is resolving. The 5 is eventually going to resolve to 1. So maybe, you know, look at these first 3 chords as a little mini F minor progression. If you do that, you'll notice there are some odd note choices in there. For example, this D flat 7 sharp 9. Again, just thinking about those first 3 chords in a context of F minor. If you simplify them, just do straight dominance, you get D flat 7, C7 to F minor. You can vamp that. You know, that's a pretty common F minor chord progression. That'd be like flat 6, 7 to 5, 7 to 1, or you know, you could think of the first chord, the D flat 7, as being like the sub 5 of 5, resolving down to 5, and the 5 resolves back to 1. You know, bluesy, cool F minor progression. But if you were to put a tension on that D flat 7 chord, the most logical choice would be the natural 9, not necessarily the sharp 9. The natural 9 fits nicely, you know, within the key of F minor. The sharp 9 on the C7 is fine. You know, that's a logical tension. But the sharp 9 on the D flat, that goes out a little bit, you know? It's interesting. I've always thought it was a little harsh, but, you know, that's what the bebop guys were into. And, you know, what I was just playing there, that's not the actual vamp of the song. I'm just trying to give some, you know, F minor context here. So, again, that sharp 9, kind of an odd choice if you're thinking F minor. You know, it kind of works, but, and I understand the concept of, you know, it just being, the whole thing being chromatic. You know, this is exactly, that you just transpose that exact same thing down a half step. You know, very cool. So, I do get that. The other weird thing is this bass figure, you know, especially under the D flat 7 chord. Again, not really what you'd expect if you're thinking F minor. You know, this A natural resolving down to this A flat, then down by a fifth. You know, that's a little bit, again, not really honoring F minor, a little bit tonicizing to that D flat chord. Ambiguous, you know, and the C7, when you get there, again, thinking about F minor, that does work, but again, bass line's a little bit out. Again, that's just a bebop mindset, thinking outside the box, outside the key, you know, just trying to be different. That's what those guys were into. So once again, I think this vamp here is just something they thought sounded hip, and it led nicely into the first chord of the song, and that's really all the intro is doing. It's setting up that first chord, because again, it just doesn't fit in with the rest of the song at all. I mean, eventually we'll get these really beautiful singing melodies and lush chords, but we start off with this really funky intro. It doesn't seem to make that much sense. And to be frank, I've never really been a big fan of this intro. When I'm playing the tune, if I'm leading the ensemble, I'll count it off and start right on the head. That's just my preference. If I'm ever going to play the intro, I really try to dress it up, you know, like I'll add some more tensions onto these chords. So you have D flat 7, sharp 9, I'll throw like a 13 in there. Maybe try to use some open strings, make it nice and dissonant. Let's see. You know, for the C7 sharp 9, again, I can throw like a 13 there. Maybe like a flat 5. Let's see. Yeah. Again, D flat 13, sharp 9. C13, sharp 9. Maybe like a flat 5. Again, trying to use those open strings. And it helps to play it rubato, really ham it up, you know, with some riffing, some cymbal washes, etc. You know, just do your thing in the spirit of bebop. Or maybe like, you know, some diminished ideas on the, you know, on that C7 chord. I will note one thing that Bill Evans does on his solo piano recording is he actually makes this first chord minor. So that, you know, is an interesting change. I've heard some other people do that too, but I really like the way Bill treats it. And it's an interesting change. It certainly takes away the funk and kind of adds a little bit of darkness. You know, a little more serious sounding, and then he leaves the next chord as that dominant, you know, maybe some diminished stuff in there. But that first chord again. Etc. All right, now we will move on to the head, the main part of the song. If you look at the key signature and scan over the lead sheet, I think the general consensus would be A flat. When somebody asks what key are we playing it in, if you're, you know, sticking to what's written on the page here, the usual response is A flat. Or if you want to be crystal clear, you could say first chord F minor 7. Again, just going with the information we're given, 4 flats. Doesn't start on an A flat chord, but if you recognize the progression, you know, you'll see that it gets there eventually. And if you skip all the way to the end of the song, you'll see that it cadences strongly on A flat, both chord and melody. So yes, A flat, perhaps the primary tonal center and the ultimate destination, but we do have a lot of modulations along the way. So if you're thinking in the key of A flat, and you want to start analyzing it, you would go 6 minor 7, 2 minor 7, 5 7. That's a 2 5, resolves to the 1. This is circle of fifths stuff here. So 1 major 7, 4 major 7, and then we get to our first modulation right here. So, you know, F minor 7, 6 minor 7, B flat minor 7 is the 2 minor 7, E flat 7 is the 5 7, resolves to the A flat major 7, which is the 1 chord, 1 major 7, D flat major 7, 4 major 7, all diatonic to the key of A flat, perfectly logical, and then we have a modulation here, G7, resolves to C major 7, and we're in a new key. So if you want to think of it that way, that's perfectly fine. Feel free to mark up your paper however you'd like. However, allow me to propose an alternate view. If you once again take into consideration the original recording, including the verse, I think your ear is led down a different path. The original recording is a whole step higher in the key of B flat, but I'm going to speak relative to what we have written on this page. So if we were to include the verse here in the key of A flat, the verse would begin in the key of G major, you know, very, very happy and bright. And it would play like that for a little while. Then it would take a hard, dramatic turn into the key of F minor. And become very dark and eerie. The second half of that verse in the key of F minor really establishes the F minor tonality. So when you get to that first chord of the A section, it really feels like the 1 chord, feels like the tonic. Again, I encourage you to check out the recording and hear it for yourself. Let me know what you think. And yes, I realize that F minor and A flat major are the same key, the relative major and minor, so it's a subtle detail, but I think it's worth talking about. I think it is interesting because, you know, I believe that Jerome Kern wrote it this way with a purpose. You know, he wouldn't go to that length to tonicize, you know, this first chord with this, you know, big, long, elaborate verse. He wouldn't do that for just no reason at all. So I think, you know, he intended this first A section to be somewhat melancholy, you know, a little unsure, and, you know, I'm happy to honor that. Also, I've been playing this song for a long, long time, and although I've never really dove this deep, you know, into it until the past month or so, but when reflecting upon how I typically hear this first A section, I realized that I always have kind of thought of it more as F minor rather than A flat major. I know as in jazz, you know, as jazz standards, we don't really take the verse into consideration, but again, even this intro we have written here sets up that first chord. You know, we have a resolution to F minor. So all signs just seem to point to F minor. That's what my ears are telling me, and so that's what I'm going to go with. So I'll start up here. Now we know F minor. Okay, F minor. So I'm going to call this the 1 chord. 1 minor 7. I'll work backwards a bit. Here's the 5-7. This resolves. Working backwards again, you can call this like flat 6-7, or maybe the sub 5 of 5. You know, I'll write both. So we go flat 6, 7. Yeah. Sub 5 of 5, whatever. It resolves down. Actually, this should be a dotted arrow, but resolves down to the dominant chord. This dominant chord resolves to the tonic, 1 minor 7. And then from there, going forward, again, 1 minor 7. Here we have the 4 minor 7. Here we have flat 7, 7. This is a 2-5 still, and this resolves to the flat 3 major 7, the relative major. I suppose, I mean, you could also call this the E flat 7 chord. You could call that the 5 of 3 perhaps, but I'm just going to be strictly diatonic as much as I can. So flat 7, 7, and we come over here, flat 6, major 7. All diatonic to the key of F minor. And then right here we have our first modulation. In relation to F, this would be the 5, 7 of 5. Secondary dominant, but it ceases to become that function. Instead, this C major chord is the new 1, C major 7, and this is a pivot chord right here, so we're going to change keys right on that G7 chord. This simply becomes the new 5-7, and it resolves to 1. So once again, F minor 7, 1 minor 7, 4 minor 7. You know, another argument for F minor is that we got 2 minor chords to start off. So I'm thinking minor, minor, you know, it's still kind of sad. Then we do take a turn to major, but it's just not quite enough to pull my ear that way. It doesn't really establish major for me. If it does for you, that's perfectly fine. Everybody's ears are different. And then here's this modulation. Now, you may ask, is this really a modulation? It's only 2 bars. You know, is that enough to, you know, consider it a modulation? And I would say yes, it is. And you have to ask yourself, you have to look at your one chord here, the C major 7, and ask yourself, is that at all related to F minor 7? Does it fit anywhere, you know, in the key? Modal interchange, like is it diatonic? And the answer is just no. There's two C chords, you know, well, the two primary C chords that could fit into the key of F. You have C minor 7, which would be diatonic to F natural minor. And you have C7, which would be the dominant chord that would resolve to F minor. C major 7 does not function in the key of F minor or in the key of A flat major, if you're still thinking that way. So when you get that, you know, established, you have to say, this is the new one chord. It cadences, you know, the G7 cadences to a C major 7 chord, and that's the one chord. Now, if you want to be really radical, you could try to argue that all of these preceding chords are related to C major 7, and that we've really, you know, been secretly in the key of C major this whole time. Say, well, this is, you know, 4 minor, you know, this is, you know, flat 7, minor 7s, Phrygian modal interchange, flat 6 major 7, you know, subdominant minor modal interchange, more Phrygian, etc. I don't think that would be widely accepted, but this is music theory. You're welcome to argue just about anything. Again, I think you'd have a hard time convincing academics and most people that it's really C major, but hey, you're free to do whatever you'd like. Anyway, again, starting off, I believe F minor up until this point, and we're in C major here to end up. All right, to start off the next 8 bars, we have another modulation. This is actually the same progression and melody transposed down a perfect fourth. But oddly enough, I don't hear this the same way. Again, up here we're thinking F minor, okay, 1 minor 7, transpose it down a fourth, you know, I should get, you know, C minor 7, the new 1 minor 7, etc. Again, I don't hear it as C minor. This time I actually do hear it as E flat major. And I think there are 2 reasons for that. One is that we just came off this bright, happy major resolution to this C major 7 chord. So I'm in the mood, so to speak. You know, I'm expecting, you know, more major sounds at some point pretty soon. The other reason is that this parallel move, you know, from C major 7 to C minor 7 is not very strong, at least not at this point in the song, and I just don't get the sense that this C minor is set up as the new key. It doesn't feel like 1, it feels like it needs to move somewhere. When I get to this E flat chord, it does feel like 1 to me. So again, coming off this C major 7 chord, you'll go into the C minor 7. We're moving along, and for whatever reason, to me that sounds like we are where we should be. And then we have the same type of modulation as before. But again, E flat major here, so right off the bat we just have a direct modulation to E flat. So this is actually the 6 minor 7. Whoops, 6 minor 7. Hope you can read that. Here's the 2 minor 7, 5 7. Again, 2 5 resolves to 1. Again, circle of fifths, you know, great jazz stuff. 4 major 7, all diatonic to the key of E flat. And then here we have another modulation. So once again, C C minor 7 is the 6 minor 7, F minor 7, 2 minor 7, B7 is the 5/7, E flat major 7 is the 1 major 7, simple enough, 4 major 7, A flat, and then here's your modulation. Again, another same exact type of modulation. Is G major 7 at all able to fit into the key of E flat major 7? No, it's not. So this is your new 1 chord. Your pivot chord would be right here. This could be the sharp 4, minor 7 flat 5 in the key of E flat, but it ceases to become that. It ceases to function as that chord. Instead, it pivots to the key of G, where it is the 2, minor 7 flat 5. We have the 5 here, 5/7. This is a 2/5, and it resolves. 1 major 7. And we are firmly in the key of G for a little while here. And then moving forward onto the bridge, here's the 5/7 of 2, which it does resolve. Here's the 2 minor 7, 2 minor 7, 5/7. That's a 2/5, everybody's favorite. And it does resolve to the 1 major 7. All right, now these 6 bars in the key of G right here. These bars may not seem that significant. It's just the bridge. It's something different. You know, Kern is just passing through keys at this point. He hasn't lingered on anything anything too long. But, however, I believe there is a deeper meaning to these 6 bars. And I ask you one more time to take the beginning verse into consideration. So back on the original recording. Recall that I said if we were to attach it onto, this lead sheet here, the verse in relation to the key of A flat would actually start in the key of G major, and it firmly establishes that key. Now, in the middle of the song, we have returned to that beginning key. And when I listen to the song as a whole, verse included, so that original recording all the way through, as the composer originally intended, these 6 bars right here feel as though I've returned home. To me, it's a callback, honoring where we began the journey, and it feels good. Now here's the thing, I have perfect pitch, so I can pick out keys without any problem, especially in a song like this. As I'm listening, I'm keeping track of everything. I remember everything that's passed by. That's just how I think. That's how I process things. So when this particular key hits again, when this key that we started in the verse, when it comes back, I immediately make that connection, that I heard this earlier. Again, that's just the way my mind works. So to me, that's really a beautiful moment in the song, and you don't get that without the verse. So again, I think there's a lot of deeper meaning to the to this song, that's kind of been lost over the years. What I'm curious to know is if the average listener or people without perfect pitch experience what I just described in any fashion. So, try it for yourself. Try listening to the recording from beginning. When you get to this part in the middle, ask yourself, does it feel familiar? And seriously, let me know in the comments. I am genuinely curious. Anyway, so that's just a little note I wanted to make about this section in the key of G. Moving on, we have kind of a call and response thing in the melody here. We come down here, just take a quick look at it. It appears to be another modulation, this time to the key of E major, so this is going to be your new 1 chord. This is going to be your new 5/7 chord. Resolves. Here's a 2/5. Oops, let me move that up a little bit. And your pivot chord could be either one of these 2 chords. You could say this is, the 7, minor 7 flat 5 in the key of G. Actually, I think I am going to say that, because since this could function in the key of G as turning to the relative minor if we were to resolve to E minor here. To me, the pivot chord really is right here. So this could be the 5/7 or the 5 of 6, 5/7 of 6. However, it ceases to be that in the key of G. Your new key right here is E major. So yeah, that would make this the 7, minor 7, flat 5, still in the key of G at that point, because I don't think your ear has been given enough information to say we're modulating. Until you get to this point, well actually until you get to this point right here, because you could still be expecting an E minor chord, coming out of this G major stuff. So let me play the whole bridge here. This. So that E major 7 is really a big surprise when you get there. In fact, you could argue that you modulate right on the E major 7 chord. It's a wild song, Kern was very progressive in his harmonies here. This is the original, writing. They didn't, change. They didn't change the harmonies here or reharmonize it at all. This is, 2 5s all over the place, modulations, very hip. That's why it was immediately absorbed into the jazz scene. But I like to think of this chord as a pivot chord. Just give yourself a little bit more time to think E. But frankly, you could, argue that up until this major 7 chord, you could argue that you're expecting to hear E minor, because, in relation to the key of G, where you just came from, yeah, relative minor would indeed make sense. And you could just cycle that around. Of course, that's a very, logical progression, but again, you're surprised by that major 7 chord. Okay, now just as soon as we get that really big brightening in the key of E major, we're immediately, turning around and going back to the key of F minor thanks to this chord. So this is just a big old direct modulation right here. There's really no way around it. So we're going back to F minor, to hit that A section again. So unfortunately, sorry we didn't get to hang out in E major too much, but again, is C7, could you argue that that's, able to fit in the key of E major? Yeah, but I think the change is too drastic here, where it's not at all, like your ear wouldn't tell you that this C7 is gonna do something in E major. It's not going to be the flat 6, 7 or anything like that. It's clearly going back to F because, you know, it's already kind of in your brain. If you reflect back on what you heard, you know, 30 seconds ago, it should feel familiar. So this is just a 5-7 moving forward, you know, and again, we're in the key of F minor here. So we have arrived at the final section of the song. Starts off as a repeat of the first section, so I'm going to just label it the same. 1 minor 7, 4 minor 7, flat 7, 7, flat 3, major 7, again 2-5, resolves. Let's see, yeah, 4, major 7. Yeah, and now we get some different stuff. It's going to take a turn. So like I said, we know we're heading towards a, you know, cadence in A flat major to end the song. We just have to figure out where exactly, you know, it feels like A flat, and that's a little bit tricky, you know, with these chords written here. Now here's the thing. Going back to the original recording, we don't get chords that are quite this hip. Instead, this, actually this chord, excuse me, is really, I'm going to mark this in green, this is a D flat, well it would be a D flat, you know, minor 6 chord, and that would be like first inversion. So, you know, that would be over like F flat. And that chord would kind of lead into actually an A flat chord, a major chord, and then it would have this E pedal. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to write that right now. So let's do, I guess we'll do like A flat over E. This would indeed be this diminished chord, you know, over E flat, over E flat. This would basically just all be over E flat until we resolve to this chord. So on the recording, it would sound like this. I'll start right here, D flat major 7. Something like that. Okay, so again, this kind of more classic, that, you know, like that inversion of that minor chord resolving down to a the major, the tonic chord with that dominant pedal in the bass. Very dramatic way to end the song. I think it actually works better than what we have written here. And I'll tell you what, I'm just going to put these chords in parentheses for right now, yeah. But going by what's written on the page, it's a little less clear. So in that case, you could say, well, yeah, I think the A flat chord, I think the turn to A flat happens right around here. In the jazz world, you know, we have these cool chords. This, in relation to F minor 7, in relation to F minor, could be the sub 5. Not really sure if that works. Again, coming off that D flat major 7 chord. Yeah, I guess that could, you know, it could function as the sub 5. You know, the dominant flat 5 substitution. So if you like C7, you know, tritone sub, G flat 7 will resolve down to F minor. That could work. And then, you know, this could be the 5 minor. But I think the change right here, just because we have something new, we have something different, I think just the fact that it sounds so different, that's enough to say that that we're going to A flat there. I could argue my point for every single one of these chords, but I'm just going to pick this one because it's a nice pivot chord. Again, it's the, you know, the coda of the song, if you will. So, you know, this used to be sub 5, ceases to be that function. Instead, we go to A flat, where it becomes the flat 7, 7, and then we can just proceed in A flat here, 3 minor 7, you know, diatonic. Here we have the, really it's the flat 3 diminished 7, which is a passing chord. 2, 5, 1 to end up the song. 2 minor 7. Here's your 5, 7. Good old 2, 5. You know, and then here's your 1. Pivots back to F minor here. So, you know, this, if we're turning it around, this would be the minor 7, 7, minor 7, minor 7, flat 5. Ceases to be that. Instead, we go back to F minor. Let me write that a little better. F minor. This is the 2, minor 7, flat 5. This is the 5, 7, 2, 5, and we're back. So there you have it. The you know, a very sophisticated song for the time. I mean, the modulations were just incredible. That's what, it was something new, you know, that's why people fell in love with it. That's why so many people wanted to play it, and the jazz cats were so eager to get their hands on it. And again, I think it's, you know, important to acknowledge the verse and, you know, some lost meanings that, you know, have happened over the years. But as far as, you know, a contemporary harmonic analysis, I think this pretty much takes care of it. This is just my take. If you have any points you want to make, please feel free to leave a comment. But yeah, that wraps up the analysis section of this video. So I hope you enjoyed it.